Debbie, and I'm an alcoholic. That's my favorite sound in the whole world. Room full of people screaming, "Hi, Debbie." It doesn't get any better than that. Well, it does. It gets better than that, but that's a good start. My favorite sound used to be, "Hey, I'll buy you a drink." But you guys are a huggy bunch. This is a lovely group. I was here a couple years ago, and I remember just loving this meeting. And sadly, I live just too far away, because now it takes about 10 hours to get out of Los Angeles. But it's really nice to be here. I would like to thank Elisa, my sponsor, and Bruce for having me, for inviting me. Thank you very much. So, newcomers, day counters, chip takers, birthday people, congratulations to all of you. Newcomers, you're the guest of honor here. And I like to say that because I did not know that when I was a newcomer. When I walked in, I sobered up in New York City about 36 years ago. And when I walked into the room, nobody made a fuss over me. And when I left, nobody said anything to me. And I had a resentment. And I had no idea that newcomers were the guests of honor. But you are, so know that. In fact, my very first meeting in New York City, which I remember really well, because to this day, this meeting stands as the most boring AA meeting I've ever been to in my life. In fact, it's a miracle I stayed sober, because I remember I was sitting there going, "Oh, fuck, this is gonna..." I just thought it was downhill from there. In fact, after the speaker, who I don't know, after the speaker was done and the meeting was over, I stood up and I said, "Hey, where's the president?" And somebody pointed me, I guess it was the secretary they sent me to, and I went up to him and I went, "Come on, that guy was boring. You should have me speak." And he said, "Isn't this your first day?" And I went, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, okay, well, you just keep coming back." And I did, thank God. So I believe is this my water? Oh, thank God. I'm so thirsty all the time. In my opinion, I was born an alcoholic. And there's a couple reasons I believe that. Number one, everybody in my family, I'm not allowed to call them alcoholics because, as we know, it's a self-diagnosed disease. Has that rule changed at all? Okay, so I still can't say that my parents were the heaviest drinkers who weren't alcoholics that I've ever known in my life. My grandparents were the second heaviest drinkers who also weren't alcoholics of anybody I knew in my life. I have 3 brothers. One has sadly passed on, but he died sober. My other 2 brothers are sober. I'm sober. One of my brothers is sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. The other doesn't like AA, and he does it on his own. And his life is very small as a result. And his brother, my other brother, who's very active in South Jersey AA, has the most unbelievably full life of anybody you've ever known. Everybody knows him. He knows everybody. My other brother, the one who doesn't work a program but is sober, I can't even imagine. He sits in his room and looks at his computer like 24 hours a day. So that right there. Anyway, my new definition of a miracle is that right there. That 4 of us, 3 brothers and me, 4 of us at this level of this family, this generation, are sober. When I first came in here and I heard that there was going to be miracles, I remember I was going, all right, I would like a BMW, and I would like to date a movie star. And I just had this whole thing going on, what I thought a miracle was. And now I know what a miracle is. A miracle is that I'm standing here. A miracle is that my family said in this generation said, the booze stops right now, right here. So Everybody in my family, I mean everybody. My mother's people were Mormons, and they even drink, okay? There's a lot of drinking in my family growing up. And the other reason that I believe I was born an alcoholic is because from about age 3, I would get this feeling. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know how to identify it because I was 3. But I got this feeling of, I now know it to be incomprehensible, just unbelievable, didn't fit in my body, didn't belong in my family, didn't fit in my skin, didn't want to be there at that moment. And I would turn to my mother, restless, irritable, and discontent. That's what I was looking for. I had that feeling from age 3 on. And I would turn to my mother and I would say, Ma, I don't feel right. And she would say something like, well, what's wrong? Or you said, no, I don't feel right. I didn't know how to describe it. But I felt other than, different than, less than, whatever than, just not in the moment, just not a part of anything that I was supposed to be a part of. And that feeling would come to me quite a few times a year. And my mom and I found a code word when I felt that way. I was allowed to say, I feel that way again. And I don't know what she did. I don't think she did anything. She probably thought to herself, well, in a couple more years, you can have a drink, and it'll all be better. But I remember, and when I came to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I kept hearing that phrase, restless, irritable, discontent. It took me a couple years, restless, irritable, and I went ding, ding, ding. That was how I felt as a kid. I mean, as a 3-year-old. It might have even been earlier. Anyway, those are the 2 big reasons why I believe I was born an alcoholic. Why I picked up was because everybody around me picked up. So I picked up. My parents had a bar in the house. There was a room called the game room. Everybody else who had the same house in the neighborhood called it the game room, and the kids played games down there. My parents called it the bar room, and there was a bar in it. And we constantly had parties. There was just people all over the place drinking all the time at our house. We were the cool house. It was the 60s. I was born in the 50s. Don't do the math, thank you. I came of age in the 60s, and by the 70s, I was a full-blown working alcoholic. I had my very first drink. I had my first drink the minute I was old enough to look over the kitchen counter because my dad would have me mix his drinks. And I would stick my finger in his drinks to taste it because I was curious. And I don't think I was more than 5 or 6, and I would just taste it, as most kids would. And here's what qualifies me as an alcoholic. I would taste it and go, eh. And I would just keep drinking it, tasting it until I liked it. Because I knew when I grew up, that was what I was going to be doing. By age 12, I had my first really big drunk. Maybe I was 11, I don't know. But my parents had a huge party, and I was the bartender. And it was like 1 for you, 1 for me. And it was vodka and Tab. Anybody remember Tab? I know. And here's another reason that I now really believe I was born an alcoholic. The moment I had that first drink, I drank until I passed out and threw up that very day, that very night, in front of everybody. It was a big party in front of all of my parents' friends. But my parents weren't really that concerned because they too were drunk. I think they might have thought it was kind of cute, actually. By high school, I was a weekend warrior. I drank every weekend. I grew up in South Jersey in the suburbs. And there's nothing to do there at all except get in your car and drive to McDonald's and hang out with other teenagers who got in their car and drove to McDonald's. And we would all be drinking, and I would always drink more. I would drink until I cried. I don't know what I was crying about, but I always cried when I drank. And then I would jump in some guy's car and throw myself at him, which I never in a million years could have done sober. They always rejected me. Apparently, it wasn't very attractive, but that was the extent of my romance in high school. And then Monday morning, everybody would be talking about me. Yeah, did you say Debbie Gasper, man? She was drunk. And everybody would whisper when I walked by. I thought I was popular because everyone was talking about me. I probably would have been much more of a falling down drunk, except in high school I had a pretty big responsibility. I was a majorette, so I had to show up in the mornings for my majorette twirling football classes. So by the time I went to college, it was the 70s, and I went to a very liberal college. I'd been drinking. I went to college in Vermont. I lived on the East Coast. There was only 2 states, that side of the Mississippi, that had an 18-year-old drinking age. Everybody else was 21, New York and Vermont. So I went to college in Vermont, no accident. And I just hit the ground running, and everybody was smoking pot and doing drugs. It was the 70s, you know. I can see that some of you were drinking in the 70s. And I'd like to tell all you youngsters that it was amazing until it wasn't. You know, everybody talks about the 60s, but the 70s, man, they made the 60s look like the 50s. They were so wild. And we weren't even drinking. We weren't even protesting. There was nothing left to protest. We were just getting screwed up all the time. It was a really vapid era. I remember that. But my freshman year, my brother hitchhiked up from Fairleigh Dickinson with a pound of pot because he was about to get busted. So he came up to my dorm room in Vermont to hide out for a couple days, and I sent him to the bar. It was a very small town I went to school in. And my brother goes to the bar, and he hangs out with some drunks there, and he comes home. He goes, hey, I just hung out with so-and-so. He's a great guy. And I went, oh, he's the town drunk. And he's like, really? He's a nice guy. He's funny. I'm like, yeah, he's funny. He's charming, but he's the town drunk. This guy, you know, was 19 years old, and he was already doing shots while people were clapping, and he always had to get carried home. Well, 6 months later, the town drunk and I fell madly in love. So in the 6 months between me arriving in college and falling in love with him, I somehow found someone that drank like I did. I remember calling my brother. I'm like, I have a boyfriend. He's like, who is it? And I'm like, it's Bebe. And he goes, the town drunk? And I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, you know, we all drink, right? So I lived with the town drunk in college, and we drank, and we drank, and we drank, and there was no stopping us at all. We were very much the town drunk. Suddenly, I was also the town drunk. I saw him recently at a reunion, and he was still drinking. Actually, it wasn't that recent. 10 years ago, he was still drinking. I was sober, and we were like the poster children for AA, because he was slouched over, he had stains on his shirt, he had chicken wings in his beard, and he was like drooling, and I was just standing there, and the two of us, you know, the path was clear if you were paying attention which one to take. Anyway, I just celebrated in January 31 years of sobriety. I haven't had a drink for 35 years, but the first 4 years that I drank, I was in New York. I didn't drink. I was in New York City. And I apparently smoked a little pot. And apparently that doesn't go over real well in AA. Although I had it all worked out when I moved to Los Angeles with about what I thought I had 4 years sober. I moved to LA, and I had that secret. I had been smoking pot, and I hadn't been going to meetings. I didn't have a sponsor. I hadn't worked a step. I don't even remember anybody telling me about steps. But miraculously, I hadn't had a drink. And I had it all figured out, and I had another girlfriend that was doing the same thing. We'd be on the phone like, yeah, I'm not giving up my time. Me neither. Yeah, screw them. I don't see anything about marijuana in the big book. I know. I'm going to keep smoking pot. Screw them. We had it all. We were just all in collusion with each other. And I had a sponsor at the time that I was afraid of. She was tough. She was a tough cookie. And why she became my sponsor? Well, because some guy I had a crush on said she'd make a good sponsor for you. That's why she became my sponsor. She didn't have anything I wanted, but she got me through the steps. But I was afraid of her. She was the kind of, which I don't recommend. It was the kind of relationship where I would call her when I knew she wasn't home, And they say, you don't have to call me back. It's okay, click. I'm going to be out, click. So I was about to take a 5-year cake at a very big meeting in LA. Lots of people, lots of sobriety, lots of respect, lots of old timers. And everybody was excited. Debbie was taking her 5-year cake. And I turned to the sponsor, and I don't know where it came from. I turned to my sponsor, who I was afraid of, and I said, I don't think I should take a 5-year cake. And she said, why is that? I said, I think maybe, possibly, there's a chance that I've been smoking some pot. And she said, well, either you have or you haven't. Either you're a liar or not. Which is it? And I was like, it's like a lion in the Wizard of Oz. I'm like, So I said, I guess I'm a liar. And she said, well, okay. And they called my name for 5 years, and I went up to the podium, and I dropped my time down to 1 year. And an amazing thing happened. No one's head exploded. No one threw me out. No one said, why I oughta. Everybody was like, yeah, whatever, No, nobody gave a rat's ass. I'm the one that cared. I cared. And that's how this works. We have to get sober for ourselves. So I gave up the time, and now I have 31 real years. But I haven't had a drink in 35. Apparently, I still have a resentment about the whole thing because I bring it up at every time I speak. So anyway, the 70s were very wild. People were tripping. People were dying, I went to college in Vermont, as I mentioned, and there was this big hill right behind our dorm. All the dorms are lined up right in front of the hill. And it wasn't unusual on a Sunday morning for somebody in a stretcher to be pulling somebody out of the woods that had walked up there, gotten fucked up, and passed out and died of the cold. I mean, it was not unusual. I saw it a couple times. People were dying a lot in the 70s. A lot of people I grew up with were dying all around the disease of alcoholism, if you were to ask me. I'm not allowed to say that because, they all did what they did, but when people are overdosing at age 13, that's not, of heroin, that's not normal. So I moved to New York City, which is a great place to drink if you're bottoming out, which I was, because you can drink 20, I don't know if you still can. I haven't been drinking in New York for 31 years, but you could drink 23 hours a day in New York City. 23 hours a day. And during that 1 hour, When you couldn't drink, you'd go to somebody's car and do coke and go, shit, when's the bar opening? They had after hours clubs, they had after hours clubs, and as the night narrowed down and the crowd got smaller, I found my people. These were the people that I hung with. These are the people I drank with. These are the guys I went out with. I ended up in all sorts of toxic relationships with all sorts of people I didn't like, until I had a couple drinks. Oh, okay, I can stand you now. But it was a pretty crazy, drunk on I had. Because I became addicted to not just alcohol and some drugs, but I became addicted to getting attention. I couldn't get enough attention. So I would drink and I would drink and I would become the biggest idiot or asshole in the room. I would do anything I had to do to get attention. I couldn't stand it if I wasn't the center of attention. So I'd be in a car driving, we'd be in a car driving, I would jump out of moving cars. I did it many, many times. One time in Boston, I jumped out of a moving car at about 3 o'clock in the morning. I was with all my girlfriends, my roommates at the time. And I was wearing a mink coat because we did that in the 70s. You wear your grandmother's mink coat. And I was wearing my grandmother's mink coat that I had inherited. And I jumped out of a car that was going 35 miles an hour. I didn't know that. I was drunk. I just opened the door because no one was paying attention to me. And I just tumbled out. And the 3 girls in the car, who were my 3 best friends, drove off and left me there. They'd had enough. And I was lying in the middle of Harvard Square in Boston, laughing my ass off. I had split the fur coat in half, so that the mink coat split in half. And it was a nice new coat. And a car full of guys pulled up because they think there's a dead person lying in the road. And they all come running up, and I remember this, they're all looking at me. And this is the first time I ever remember that look of incomprehensible pity and demoralization. I got it many, many, many more times. But this time, they're all looking at me, and they go, you are one screwed up chick. Because I was just lying there laughing, and they left me too. So I had to walk home, and I did stuff like that all the time. I would jump in front of cars that were coming. Like if it was a friend picking me up out in front of my parents' house, I would run up to the car and I would do a belly flop on the hood of the car. I would wake up with bruises all over the place. My parents would go, what's wrong with you? What's with the bruises? They sent me to the doctors because they were convinced I had leukemia because my entire body was bruised. And it didn't occur to me to say, well, I've been jumping on the hoods of cars. Is that wrong? So, and then when I lived in New York City, I would go out into the middle of like Columbus Avenue in New York City with my coat, and I would play Toreador with cars that were coming on. It was absolutely, I guess I had a death wish. I don't know. But again, I just wanted to be outrageous. I had to be outrageous. I used to quit drinking a lot. I would not call myself a periodic, but I would quit drinking a lot for 2 reasons. One would be because it was getting really expensive to drink, and I figured if I quit drinking for quite a few months, when I go back to it, it would be easier to get. Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. The main reason I quit drinking was because I would gain like 40 pounds when I would go on my benders. So I would have a wedding coming up or a reunion, and the only way I could drop the 40 pounds was to stop drinking. So I did that a lot. And my brother was getting married, And there was this really big fancy wedding, and I wanted to get into this certain size for the wedding, so I was on the wagon for 10 months. Now, my younger brother, who's still sober in New Jersey, I should say sober again, he had 2 relapses. We had just done an intervention on him. He was a mess. He lost everything. Including his son and his wife and his house. And I mean, he lost everything, and his life was going down the tubes. We had a little family meeting, and we decided to do an intervention on him and suggest that perhaps he goes to AA. None of us even knew what AA was at the time, but we'd heard about it. So the whole family gathers, and we're drinking. And we did an intervention on my brother drinking. Yeah, you can't drink anymore. We can. You can't. So my brother had sobered up before me, and he would call me up in New York City. I was living there, and he would tell me that he was going to the meetings, and it was awful because they were talking about God. Now, my parents are hardcore atheists. I was raised an atheist. There was no religion. We went to no church. The only time we went to a church is if somebody died and we really had to, or if somebody got married. But I was brought up with this really heavy fear of God. Really, I mean, it scared me, and it scared my brother, and he's sitting in the rooms of AA, and they're talking about God. And by this point in my life, I know I'm an alcoholic. I know I'm drinking alcoholically. I have friends that are starting to sober up. I would just wipe them out of my book, like, all right, there's another one, bites the dust, not going to call her anymore. If anybody judged my drinking, they were out of my life. Fortunately, I drank with, people that drank the way I did, so I didn't get judged too much. But my brother called me up, and I'm at home alone drinking on a Friday night, and I said, hey, how are those A&A meetings going down there? And he's like, it sucks, man. There's God. They talk about God. Did you know that? And I'm like, oh, no. And I freaked out because I knew I was headed to AA. I knew I was coming here. I didn't know when. I didn't know how, but I knew I was an alcoholic. So that made me drink faster and longer, because now, oh my God, how am I ever going to go and sober up if there's God in an AA meeting? So he didn't stay sober. I didn't get sober for many, many years after that. But there was this big family wedding, and we're all the people that were in the wedding were in this back room. And I hadn't had a drink for 9 months, and I decided to go out and splurge on my brother's very, very fancy, expensive wedding. Unbeknownst to me, what they say is, your disease is working overtime. So the second I started drinking that night, I got completely sloshed. When we were in this separate room, and when you're in a big fancy wedding, they have the band announce the groom and the maid of honor, and and you come in and you make an appearance. So we were all in a separate room waiting to get introduced to the public, and we had a bar back there because these are my brothers and all the people we grew up with, biggest drunks I've ever known in my life. And we could not be in that room for 30 minutes without a bar. So we had a full bar, 2 bartenders. And I went up to get what I thought was my second drink. And the bartender grabbed my arm, and he said, Debbi. It was a small room. They knew my name already. He goes, Debbi, this is your 7th drink. And I said, yeah, well, we drink. We're drinkers. That's what we do. We drink. And he said, no one here has even had a second. And that got me. And I looked around, and there were my brothers who taught me how to drink, and there were people I'd known since I was 2, who I'd been drinking with since I was 12. And that got me. Now, here's what qualifies me as an alcoholic. Because a normal person would have said, wow, thanks for pointing that out. But I said, oh, you don't realize that there's two of us. I'm a twin. This is a room with about 20 people in it, not even. And the guy looked at me, second time I remember that incomprehensible, demoralized look, and he goes like this. And I went, what? You thought I was drinking? And I put this whole show on. I go, you wait right here. And I walk out into the main room, and I change my hairdo. And I walk back in, I go, hi, I'm Donna. I understand you thought Debbie was doing all the drinking. By this point, the other bartenders walked down to join the first bartender, and they're both looking at me like this, and they're just shaking their head. And I would not give it up. I would not break character. I said, hold on, I'm going to go get Debbie now. And I changed my voice a little, and I changed my hair, and I came back, and I never let up. And I was so horrified. I was so demoralized that I went into the main room, and I got my mother. I said, Mom, you have to come to tell these bartenders that you have twin daughters. And my mother's like, whatever, okay. So she comes back to the room with me. And I go, ask my mother. And my mother goes, yes, I have twin daughters. Debbie has a twin sister. And at this point, I mean, now the bartenders are looking at my mother with that incomprehensible, demoralizing glare. So about a month later, I sobered up because that got me. That got me, having 7 drinks. And it was time. You know, I hear people talk in the rooms all the time about what they've lost. I lost my husband, my wife, I lost my kids, I lost my house, I ran over the dog, you know, these stories that we hear here. And I used to sit in the back of the room and I used to judge because I would say, wow, what a loser. Boy, I wasn't that bad. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I don't belong here. I didn't lose anything, and then I realized one day that I couldn't get anything. I didn't have anything to lose. I couldn't keep a relationship together. Almost every guy I ever went out with left my house screaming, "You're a crazy bitch." Did you want my number? You know. So my life was getting very, very small, and it was showing up in every aspect of it. So I decided to go with my best friend into Alcoholics Anonymous. Is that the time? 10 minutes? I've been talking for 30 minutes? So she took me to my first meeting, which, as I mentioned, was the worst meeting I'd ever been to in my life. And I haven't had a drink since, and that was 34 years ago. And after being in New York for about 3 or 4 years, I moved to Los Angeles. And here is where my sobriety began, the day I gave my time up at the podium and dropped my time down to 1 year. They say the road gets narrower. My road got very narrow that day. And again, I have no idea. I had no idea that was coming. So my sponsor, I got rid of the mean sponsor, and I got a really, really, really easy, nice one, an older woman. Yeah, I was playing Goldilocks. It was like I had a really mean one, then I had a really nice one. And now I have a medium one. Just perfect. And I highly recommend that you find a sponsor that fits you and that rocks your world. Because there is nothing more incredible than the relationship you get to have with your sponsor and your sponsees. It's just amazing. Where else in the world do you get a person to work for you for free like that? It's an astounding gift. And so many people, well, I shouldn't speak for all of you, and yet I'm going to. So many people don't like the sponsor, like, I don't really like my, Get a sponsor that rocks your world. About a year into, no, 6 months into my sobriety, after having no relationships for many years because I was a mess, I was a crazy bitch, I fell in love with someone, which never would have happened if not for my sponsor at the time and the steps of AA. Because I would literally call her up and say, he wants to take me out again. And she would say, I think that's a good idea, sweetheart. And I'm like, I don't want to go. I was so scared. I was literally on the phone with her. I was 40 years old on the phone with her going, I don't know how to act. I did not know what to do. I did not know how to act. So, and he knew this, and he was a normie, and he could not have been kinder about the whole thing, and he just got it. He understood it. He had a lot of alcoholic friends. He was, in fact, he was literally a designated driver for all his drunk friends. So about 10 years into our relationship, he gets diagnosed with cancer. And our whole lives change, and he gets pretty bedridden, and he never really feels well again. And around our 20th anniversary, he gets diagnosed with a second cancer. He gets pancreatic cancer, stage 4. And the first call I made was not to my brothers or his sister or his mother. It was to my sponsor. It was the first call I made. And she said, you will never go through this alone. And I know she was talking about a higher power, but I also know she was talking about her and, the troops, the girls. And while Pat was going through, we were both going through this, AA showed up for me in a way that just blew my mind. People I didn't even know knocking on the door. I hear you need soup, I hear you need this. Somebody would knock on my door and say, I'm here to get your laundry. Where is it? And like, who are you? And we had normie friends. Pat had a lot of normie friends. I had normie friends. And they were all like, what can we do? What can we do? Is there something we could do? But the AAs, you showed up. You paid that 12-step call on me. And that was when I really fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. And Pat was able to die knowing that I was being taken care of. And that was so important to him. And one of the very last things he said to me was, I am blown away by Alcoholics Anonymous. So if I have any message at all to anybody, find someone that just knocks your socks off and ask them to sponsor you. So here it is with my 31 years of actual sobriety. And all I can say about this program is that everything's different about me. Except my hair still won't take a curl. I have straight blonde hair. That is it. Every single thing is different about me. I used to be so nasty. I was that drunk. I would walk into a room and people would clear an aisle for me. I thought I was famous. People were afraid of me. Nobody wanted to be in the line of fire of my mouth. And it took me a long time to tame my mouth, and it still has its own opinion sometimes and goes on without me. But because of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and the most brilliant thing in the world, restraint of tongue and pen, I have been able to maintain a lot of lifelong friendships. I was able to reassert a lot of old friendships that I had ruined. Because people now want to be around me. I mean, they want to be my friends. And I don't think that was so before. I think I had hostages. I think people were afraid of me. And if I said, hey, let's go out drinking, they go, oh, all right. And I could drink anybody I knew under the table, except the town drunk that I was in love with in college. He's literally the only person that ever drank more than I did. I was one time sitting at a very upscale bar in Manhattan, and I was drinking with some Knickerbockers, New York Knicks. These guys were 7'6". And there's about 3 of them at the bar buying me drinks, and I'm 25 years old. I weigh about 120, and I'm drinking toe to toe with these guys. And they're like, "Where are you putting that, little lady?" And that's how I drank. More to me, drinking was foreplay. That's how I thought I was going to find the love of my life, was just drinking at them. So now, here I am, and I get to come to this incredible meeting, and I get to see all these beautiful faces, and they all yell, "Hi, Debbie," when I come to the podium. And there's no better feeling. You feel like a rock star for a minute. And everybody should get to feel like a rock star for at least a minute. I have a sponsor. I have sponsees. I'm taking somebody through the steps as we speak. She's been trying to get sober for 35 years. And she's been in and out of the rooms for 35 years. And she's finally put together 4 months. It's a miracle. That is a miracle. These are miracles. So thank you all so much for letting me babble at you today. It was lovely to come, lovely to see you all, and I hope you all drive safely tonight. God bless.